The echo of loyalty, the scent came first, faint but unmistakable. Even through the antiseptic cloud that permeated the sterile hallway, his nose detected it. Gunpowder, desert sand, and something uniquely human. Axel's ears pricked forward, his entire body suddenly electric with recognition. After 3 years of darkness, was it possible? Could the impossible have found him here, in this place of forgotten souls? The German shepherd's amber eyes, once dull with resignation, now blazed with desperate hope as he lunged against the restraints that kept him tethered to his new handler. For the first time since his arrival at Hope Springs Animal Sanctuary, Axel wasn't trying to retreat. He was fighting to advance, to follow that phantom scent that whispered of a life he'd thought forever lost. Exclaimed Megan, struggling to maintain her grip on the leash. She'd never seen this behavior from the shelter's most notorious resident. The dog who had spent months pressed into the farthest corner of his kennel, refusing all human contact, was now straining forward with such force that his muscular body trembled with the effort. What force could possibly break through 3 years of trauma? What memory could awaken a soul that had retreated so deeply into itself? To understand the miracle unfolding in that sterile hallway, we must first return to where Axel's story began, and to the extraordinary journey that would eventually lead 2 broken spirits back to each other against all odds. Setting and characters: Pine Ridge Animal Haven operated well beyond capacity during the sweltering summer of 2022. The nationwide surge in animal surrenders following the return to normal after the pandemic had pushed the rural California shelter to its breaking point. For shelter director Vanessa Reyes, a 30-year veteran of animal rescue work with silver-streaked dark hair and perpetually tired eyes, the day had already delivered 3 emergency cases: a litter of abandoned kittens, a severely injured pit bull mix, and an elderly poodle surrendered after its owner entered hospice care. "We're completely out of space," she explained to Animal Control Officer Diego Morales as he carried in yet another crate. "We're already scheduled to make some heartbreaking decisions tomorrow." Diego set the crate down carefully. "You'll want to make room for this one, Vanessa. Foreclosure situation in Palmdale." Owner just walked away. From the condition of both the property and the dog, it's been months. The dog inside the crate was barely recognizable as a German shepherd, severely emaciated. His once proud frame was now a collection of sharp angles and protruding bones. Matted fur hung in filthy clumps from his body. A collar, now embedded into his neck as he had grown, would require surgical removal. Most disturbing, however, was his complete absence of response. No growling, no whimpering, not even a flicker of interest in his new surroundings. He simply stared at nothing, as if his physical body had survived while something essential inside had perished. Dr. Maya Wong, the shelter's lead veterinarian, catalogued the extensive list of medical issues as she performed her initial examination. Severe malnutrition with a body score of 2 out of 9. Critical dehydration requiring immediate fluids. Multiple infected wounds. Parasitic infestation. And pressure sores from lying on hard surfaces for extended periods. His physical condition is serious, but treatable, she told Vanessa once the initial interventions were complete. "I'm more concerned about his psychological state. He's exhibiting extreme dissociation, a complete shutdown response I typically only see in animals who've experienced prolonged trauma." The German shepherd, whom the medical team temporarily named Axel, displayed behaviors that went beyond normal fear. When approached in his kennel, he would press himself against the wall, his body rigid with terror. He would not make eye contact, would not approach the front of the kennel, even for food, and responded to any attempt to leash him by freezing completely. For 2 weeks, the dedicated staff made minimal progress, despite their best efforts. Security cameras revealed that Axel would only eat during the quietest overnight hours when no humans were present. His only movement was to pace in tight, anxious circles when he believed himself completely alone. "We're running out of options," Vanessa acknowledged during a staff meeting in late July. "If we can't place him with a specialized rescue by next week, we may need to consider behavioral euthanasia." Ryan Hughes, the shelter's behavioral specialist with a decade of experience rehabilitating traumatized animals, made one final attempt to connect with Axel. Rather than the direct approaches that had failed previously, he simply sat on the floor in the corridor outside the kennel, his back against the opposite wall, reading case notes aloud in a soft, steady voice. For nearly an hour, Ryan maintained this quiet presence, seemingly ignoring Axel while remaining calmly in his vicinity. When he finally stood to leave, he noticed something that gave him pause. Axel remained in his corner, but his eyes had shifted. They were now tracking Ryan's movements. For just a moment, their gazes met. The first eye contact the shepherd had initiated since his arrival. "I need more time," Ryan told Vanessa, his voice urgent. "I think he's still in there somewhere." None of them could have anticipated that the following day would bring an unexpected visitor who would change everything. Conflict problem Emma Mitchell hadn't intended to visit the animal shelter that Thursday morning. At 32, her work as an occupational therapist at Veterans Memorial Hospital consumed most of her waking hours. Her recent separation from her husband of 8 years had left her temporarily living in a small apartment that explicitly prohibited pets. A dog was absolutely not on her agenda. "I'm just dropping off some donations," she explained to the volunteer at the reception desk, gesturing to the bags of towels, blankets, and pet supplies she'd collected from colleagues. "My brother used to volunteer here before he deployed." Sophia, the weekend supervisor, overheard the conversation. "We really appreciate the donations. Would you like a quick tour? We've made several improvements to the facility recently." Emma hesitated, checking her watch. "I suppose I have a little time before my shift." The tour progressed through the main adoption areas, where sociable dogs approached their kennel doors with wagging tails and hopeful expressions. Emma offered gentle words to each, but felt no particular connection. "That's most of our adoption-ready animals," Sophia explained as they neared the end of the corridor. "The area beyond is primarily for medical cases and behaviorally challenged dogs who aren't yet available for adoption." "Would it be all right if we continue?" Emma asked. "My brother always had a soft spot for the difficult cases." Sophia hesitated. "Of course, but please stay back from the kennel doors. Some of these dogs are still working through significant issues." As they walked through the rehabilitation section, Sophia briefly explained each case. A dog recovering from emergency surgery, another being treated for heartworm, a trio of neglected puppies gaining weight before adoption. Then they reached Axel's kennel. "This is perhaps our most challenging resident," Sophia said quietly. "German Shepherd, approximately 3 years old, found abandoned in a foreclosure. He's been here almost a month and still won't come out of that corner or interact with anyone. We're hoping a rescue group specializing in severe cases might have the resources for his rehabilitation." Emma stopped, something about the huddled figure in the dim corner catching her attention. Axel was pressed against the wall, his amber eyes visible in the shadows, watching them warily. "What happened to him?" she asked. "We don't know specifics, but based on his behavior, we suspect prolonged abuse or neglect. He's shown no aggression, just extreme fear. What concerns us most is his complete withdrawal. He's essentially shut down." Emma stood silently observing the shepherd. Then, without asking permission, she sat down cross-legged on the floor outside the kennel, her back against the opposite wall. Coincidentally, the same position Ryan had taken the previous day. "What are you doing?" Sophia asked, surprised. "I'm not entirely sure," Emma admitted, "just giving him space while still being present. Do you mind if I just sit here for a few minutes?" Sophia checked her watch. "I need to help with medication rounds, but I can come back in about 15 minutes. Emma nodded, her eyes never leaving the shepherd. After Sophia left, she sat in comfortable silence, occasionally glancing at her phone, but mostly just existing quietly, making no demands on the frightened dog. 10 minutes passed with no visible change. Axel remained frozen in his corner, though his eyes never left Emma. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shifted his weight. It wasn't movement toward her, just a slight relaxation of his rigid posture. When Sophia returned, she found Emma still sitting quietly. "Any change?" she whispered. "Not really," Emma replied softly. "But I'd like to come back tomorrow if that's okay." Sophia looked surprised. "Certainly, but he'll likely be the same tomorrow. These cases typically require months of work." Emma stood, brushing off her jeans. "I understand. I just feel like I should return." As she gathered her belongings to leave, she glanced once more at the kennel. Axel had shifted slightly, now watching her departure with what almost appeared to be curiosity. What Emma couldn't articulate even to herself was why this particular dog had captured her attention. Perhaps it was something in his eyes, a distant echo of awareness buried beneath layers of fear. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a recognition that neither she nor anyone at the shelter could yet understand. Journey development. Emma returned to the shelter the following morning, arriving just as they opened. She came prepared this time, bringing a folding camp chair, a book, and a small Bluetooth speaker playing gentle instrumental music. Equipment she sometimes used with her most anxious therapy patients. "I wasn't sure you'd actually return," Ryan said, meeting her at the front desk. Sophia had informed the staff about Emma's interest in Axel. "Honestly, I wasn't sure either," Emma admitted, "but I couldn't stop thinking about him last night." Ryan led her back to Axel's kennel. The German Shepherd was in his usual corner, but he seemed to recognize Emma immediately, his ears shifting slightly forward. A subtle change that didn't escape Ryan's trained eye. "That's interesting," he noted. "He's unusually alert to your arrival." Emma set up her chair about 6 feet from the kennel door, positioning it at an angle rather than directly facing Axel. She placed the small speaker nearby, keeping the volume low, just enough to provide gentle background sounds. "Do you mind if I just sit with him for a while?" she asked. Ryan nodded. "I'll check in periodically. Just remember, no sudden movements, no prolonged direct eye contact, and please don't attempt to enter the kennel without staff present." For the next 3 hours, Emma simply existed in Axel's presence. She read her book aloud occasionally, her voice soft and measured. Sometimes she worked quietly on patient notes, seemingly ignoring Axel completely, though she remained acutely aware of his presence. Around noon, Ryan returned with a sandwich for Emma. "Any changes?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Emma nodded slightly. "He moved to the middle of the kennel about an hour ago. He's been watching me, but returns to his corner whenever other people walk by." Ryan peered carefully into the kennel. Axel was indeed closer than he had ever seen him voluntarily position himself. "That's remarkable progress," he said, trying to contain his professional excitement. After Ryan left, Emma continued her quiet presence. She began softly talking to Axel about neutral topics, her morning routine, the book she was reading, the weather, never looking directly at him, simply allowing him to become accustomed to her voice. The watershed moment came shortly after 2:00 p.m. Emma had been silently reading for almost 30 minutes when she sensed movement. Looking up with careful peripheral vision, she saw that Axel had approached the front of the kennel. He still maintained distance from the door, but he was standing, watching her with an intensity that felt different from fear. Moving very slowly, Emma shifted her chair slightly closer to the kennel. Axel watched but didn't retreat. She began reading aloud again, her voice soft and rhythmic. When Vanessa came to check on the situation, she stopped several yards away, stunned by what she was seeing. "I've never seen him this far from his corner," she whispered to Ryan, who had joined her. What did she do? Nothing, Ryan replied. That's what's so remarkable. She just existed near him, patiently, without demands. Before leaving that evening, Emma asked if she could return the next day. Vanessa didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I'm adjusting his status in our system right now. No decisions will be made about his future until we see where this goes. As Emma packed up her things, Axel retreated to his corner, but the movement seemed less frantic, more deliberate. Their eyes met briefly as she turned to leave. "See you tomorrow," she said softly. What no one yet realized was that Axel's response to Emma wasn't random. There was something specific about her that had penetrated his defenses, something that would soon reveal itself in an extraordinary way. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma visited Axel every day, rearranging her work schedule to spend at least 2 hours at the shelter. Each day brought subtle but significant progress. By the end of the first week, Axel would approach the kennel door when Emma arrived, though he'd quickly retreat if anyone else appeared. "I've never seen bonding happen this quickly with a traumatized dog," Ryan observed while reviewing the security footage, especially one who showed such profound, shut-down behaviors. Emma couldn't explain it either. "It feels like we've met before," she admitted. "Like he somehow recognizes me, though I know that's impossible." By day 10, Axel was accepting treats from Emma's hand through the kennel bars, a milestone that brought tears to Vanessa's eyes. "We need to start thinking about next steps," the director suggested. "Would you consider fostering him? If I found somewhere pet-friendly, I'd consider it." That afternoon, while sitting with Axel, Emma received a phone call from a colleague at the hospital. Dr. Elijah Cooper, a neurologist, was looking for an occupational therapist for a special case, a veteran with a traumatic brain injury and PTSD who needed home-based therapy. The VA approved specialized care, but he refuses to come to the hospital, her colleague explained. "Would you be willing to do home visits 3 times a week? I know it's outside your normal schedule." Emma agreed to meet the patient the following day, scheduling the appointment for early morning so she could still visit Axel afterward. The next morning, Emma arrived at a modest ranch house in the foothills. A VA social worker met her in the driveway. "Just so you're prepared," she explained. "Major Beckman has been through extensive trauma. ID explosion in Afghanistan 3 years ago. Physically, he's recovered remarkably well, but the PTSD and TBI have been challenging. He's withdrawn from almost all social contact." Emma nodded, familiar with such cases from her previous work at a military rehabilitation center. The social worker led her inside where a man in his mid-30s sat in a wheelchair by the window. Though clearly muscular and otherwise healthy-looking, his posture was tense, his expression guarded. He acknowledged Emma with just a brief nod. "Major Beckman, this is Emma Mitchell, the occupational therapist Dr. Cooper recommended," the social worker said. Emma approached slowly, keeping her movements predictable. "Good morning, Major Beckman. It's nice to meet you." For a moment, he seemed to study her intently. Then, unexpectedly, his expression shifted. "Have we met before?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. I don't think so," Emma replied, setting down her therapy bag. Emma replied, setting down her therapy. "I moved to the area fairly recently." The session proceeded professionally, with Emma assessing his mobility and explaining the therapy plan. Major Beckman remained reserved but cooperative, unusually so, according to the social worker, who whispered to Emma as they scheduled the next appointment. "He hasn't engaged that well with any provider since I took his case." Later that afternoon, as Emma sat outside Axel's kennel, she noticed something odd. She'd worn the same clothes from her morning appointment, and Axel seemed particularly interested in sniffing her through the kennel bars, especially her shoes and the hem of her pants. On impulse, she asked Ryan, Has Axel had any history with military personnel that you know of? Ryan looked surprised. We don't know anything about his background. Why? Just wondering, Emma replied, watching as Axel continued to investigate her scent with unusual intensity. 2 days later, Emma arrived at Major Beckman's house for their second session. As she approached the door, she heard barking from inside. Ferocious, desperate barking. The social worker met her outside, looking concerned. He's having a difficult day. Nightmares last night. He mentioned a dog, apparently. He worked with a military dog in Afghanistan. The PTSD episode seems connected to losing the dog during the explosion. Emma's heart began racing. Did he mention what kind of dog? A German shepherd named Axel. Climax. Emma could barely focus during Major Beckman's therapy session. Her mind was racing with possibilities. Could it be the same dog? It seemed impossible, and yet something kept nagging at her. Your dog in Afghanistan? She finally asked as they finished the session. What happened to him? Major Daniel Beckman's face darkened. Axel was a specialized search dog, not officially mine. He belonged to the military, but we worked together for 2 years. He paused, his voice tightening. After the IED, I was evacuated immediately. They told me later that Axel had run off after the explosion, likely disoriented. Likely disoriented? Never found. He paused again. I requested to stay and search for him, but my injuries were too severe. What did he look like? Emma asked carefully. German shepherd, black and tan. Distinctive scar on his right ear from an earlier mission. He looked at her, curiously. Why all these questions? Emma took a deep breath. This might sound crazy, but I've been visiting a German shepherd at the county shelter. He was found abandoned, extremely traumatized. No one can get near him except me. Beckman's expression remained skeptical. Lots of German shepherds end up in shelters. This one has a scar on his right ear, Emma said quietly. The change in Beckman's face was instantaneous. Shock, disbelief, and a flash of hope, quickly tempered by doubt. That's not possible. Axel was in Afghanistan 3 years ago. Military dogs sometimes get brought back and adopted out, Emma suggested. Or he could have been shipped back for medical treatment and somehow got lost in the system. It happens? Beckman's hands gripped his wheelchair armrests. Do you have a picture? Emma showed him several photos she'd taken of Axel at the shelter. Beckman studied them intently, his breathing quickening. I can't tell for sure, he said finally, but the markings look right. There's one way to find out, Emma replied. Would you be willing to come to the shelter? An hour later, Emma had made all the arrangements. Vanessa had agreed to a private visit after regular hours, and Beckman's social worker had helped him into Emma's car, his wheelchair folded in the trunk. When they arrived, Ryan met them at the side entrance. I've moved him to the meet-and-greet room, he explained. It's quieter there, but please understand, if he shows signs of stress, we'll need to end the session immediately. Beckman nodded, his face tense as Emma pushed his wheelchair down the corridor. Outside the meet-and-greet room, she stopped. Ready? She asked softly. Beckman took a deep breath and nodded. Ryan opened the door, and Emma wheeled Beckman inside. Axel was at the far end of the room, still cautious in the unfamiliar environment. At first, he didn't seem to notice them, his attention focused on a toy Emma had brought previously. Then, Beckman spoke, a single word in a command tone completely different from his normal voice. Berit. Axel's reaction was instantaneous. His head snapped up, ears fully erect. For a long moment he stared at Beckman, motionless except for his nose working overtime, processing the scent. Axel, calm, Beckman said, his voice breaking slightly. What happened next left everyone in the room speechless. Axel, the dog who wouldn't approach anyone who had spent weeks pressed into corners avoiding human contact, launched himself across the room with a high-pitched whine that escalated into joyous barking. The transformation was complete and immediate. His entire body language changed from fearful to exuberant as he reached Beckman, nearly knocking over the wheelchair in his excitement. Beckman buried his face in the shepherd's neck, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs as Axel whined and licked and pressed against him, trying to climb into his lap despite his size. "I think that answers the question," Ryan whispered to Emma, both of them wiping away tears. Resolution: the mystery of how a military working dog from Afghanistan ended up abandoned in California would never be fully solved. Through Beckman's VIA contacts and the military's working dog program, they pieced together a partial timeline. Axel had indeed been found after the explosion, injured but alive, and eventually transported back to the U.S. for rehabilitation at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. Deemed unsuitable for continued military service due to his own trauma symptoms, he had been adopted through a private organization that placed retired military dogs. From there, the trail went cold. Perhaps multiple homes, an owner who couldn't handle his special needs, ultimately abandoned. What mattered was that Axel, whose official military designation they discovered was 9317, nicknamed Axel by Beckman for his pivotal role in their unit, had found his person again. The reunion created its own challenges. Beckman lived alone in a single-story house, still struggling with his injuries and PTSD. Axel, while immediately responsive to Beckman, remained fearful of other people and new environments. Both were wounded warriors who needed support. Emma became the bridge between them. Her occupational therapy sessions with Beckman continued, now with Axel eagerly participating, somehow sensing which exercises Beckman needed encouragement to complete. The German shepherd, who had hidden from human touch for months, now gently nudged Beckman's arm when he began to flag during therapy. "He's doing the same job he was trained for," Emma observed after a particularly successful session. Military dogs are taught to guide, support, and sometimes physically assist their handlers. He's remembered his purpose. Within a month, Beckman's physical progress had accelerated dramatically. The motivation to care for Axel pushed him to greater independence, standing from his wheelchair for longer periods, eventually using just a cane for short distances around the house. Axel's transformation was equally remarkable. His fear of strangers diminished significantly, though he remained protective of Beckman. His physical health improved, his coat regaining its luster, muscles rebuilding over his once protruding ribs. Ryan visited regularly to help with Axel's continued training, particularly in managing his protective instincts appropriately. "His behavior makes perfect sense now," he explained. Military working dogs form incredibly strong bonds with their handlers. Being separated from Major Beckman, especially after a traumatic event, would have been psychologically devastating. The shelter formally transferred Axel's ownership to Beckman through the Pets for Vets program, waiving all fees. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about their reunion, prompting an outpouring of community support. A local contractor volunteered to build a secure fence around Beckman's property. A pet supply store provided a lifetime of free food for Axel. Emma found herself spending more time at Beckman's home than required by her professional duties. What had begun as therapy sessions evolved into shared meals, movie nights, and long conversations. Beckman gradually revealed pieces of his story, the person he had been before his injuries, his dreams for the future that had been derailed, his struggle to find purpose again. "Axel recognized something in you," he told Emma one evening as they sat on his patio, watching the shepherd patrol the newly fenced yard. "From the first day at the shelter, he knew you were someone he could trust." Emma smiled. "I think maybe we recognized something in each other, pieces that needed healing. 6 months after Axel and Beckman's reunion, Emma arrived at their house for what was officially her last occupational therapy session. Beckman had progressed beyond all expectations, now walking unassisted for moderate distances, even occasionally jogging short stretches with Axel in the early mornings. The door opened before she could knock, Beckman standing tall without support, Axel by his side, both looking healthier and more vibrant than she could have imagined during those first encounters. "Ready for your final evaluation?" she asked, trying to keep her voice professionally neutral, despite the complex emotions she felt. The session went perfectly, with Beckman meeting or exceeding all his therapeutic goals. When they finished, he handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a job offer from the VA's new canine therapy program. They were looking for an occupational therapist to help develop protocols for veterans working with service dogs, someone with Emma's unique combination of therapeutic expertise and understanding of canine behavior. "I might have mentioned your name to some people," Beckman admitted with a smile. "They're creating the position with you in mind." Emma stared at the letter, stunned by the opportunity to combine her professional skills with her newfound passion. "There's something else," Beckman said, suddenly looking nervous. Axel seemed to sense his anxiety pressing closer to his side. "I've been wondering what happens now, with us." Emma looked up, her heart racing. "You know, now that you're not officially my therapist anymore," he continued, "I was hoping maybe you'd consider dinner without the medical notebooks and treatment plans." She smiled, relief and joy washing over her. "I thought you'd never ask." As Emma stepped forward to close the distance between them, Axel gave a soft woof of approval. The German shepherd who once hid from all human contact now stood confidently between the two people he had helped bring together, the handler he had found against impossible odds, and the woman who had helped them both heal. Message. Reflection. The remarkable journey of Axel, Major Beckman, and Emma illuminates profound truths about loyalty, resilience, and the mysterious connections that can form between souls, both human and canine, who have experienced trauma. At its core, this story reveals the extraordinary capacity for loyalty that lies within the canine heart. Despite 3 years of separation, despite whatever hardships and mistreatment Axel endured in the interim, his recognition of Beckman was instantaneous and absolute. This unwavering loyalty exists beyond reason, beyond language, beyond time itself, a connection so profound that neither trauma nor distance could sever it completely. What makes such loyalty possible? Perhaps it begins with the unique relationship between military handlers and their working dogs. These partnerships are forged in the crucible of training and strengthened through shared purpose and danger. The bond becomes something transcendent, a silent language of mutual trust where each becomes an extension of the other, reading subtle cues and responding instinctively as a single unit. But Axel's story speaks to something even deeper: the capacity for animals to remember and to feel. His shut-down response at the shelter wasn't simply fear. It was grieving. Having lost the person who gave his life meaning and purpose, Axel retreated into himself. What appeared as trauma-induced behavioral issues was actually profound loss. A dog who had lost his reason for being. This understanding forces us to reconsider how we perceive animals and their emotional lives. If a dog can carry the memory of his handler for years, can recognize a voice command in a language spoken half a world away, and can transform instantly from fearful to joyous at this recognition, what does this tell us about the depth and complexity of animal consciousness? Equally powerful is what Axel's story reveals about human resilience. Major Beckman's recovery accelerated dramatically after reuniting with his former partner. A man who had withdrawn from the world found renewed purpose in caring for the dog who once protected him. The roles reversed. Now it was Beckman and providing care and security for Axel. Yet this role reversal itself became healing. giving Beckman a sense of purpose and responsibility beyond his own recovery. This illustrates a profound truth about trauma recovery. Connection heals. Whether human or animal, we recover best not in isolation but through relationship. Beckman and Axel each found in the other a living reminder of who they were before trauma altered their lives. In recognizing each other, they each reclaimed parts of themselves that had been buried beneath layers of pain and fear. Emma's role in this story highlights another essential truth. Sometimes healing requires a bridge. Her unique position, understanding both human and canine psychology, sensing the potential connection before either Beckman or Axel could articulate it, allowed her to create the conditions for reunion. This speaks to the power of empathetic presence, of simply bearing witness without demands or expectations. Emma's ability to sit quietly with Axel's fear, to exist in his space without requiring anything from him, created the safety necessary for his gradual emergence from shutdown. In our hurried world where quick fixes and immediate results are prized, Axel's story reminds us that healing follows its own timeline. The patience shown by Emma, by the shelter staff, and eventually by Beckman himself, honors the reality that recovery from profound trauma cannot be rushed. The slow, incremental steps of progress, a shift in position, a momentary meeting of eyes, an acceptance of food from human hands. These small victories laid the foundation for the dramatic reunion that followed. Perhaps most powerfully, this story illuminates how healing often comes through helping others. Axel found his way back to himself by resuming his role as Beckman's supporter. Beckman found strength in becoming Axel's protector. Emma discovered her professional calling through witnessing their reunion. Each found purpose in service to another, creating a virtuous cycle of giving and receiving care. In a world that often seems fragmented and divided, stories like Axel's remind us of the invisible threads that connect us. Threads that transcend species, that persist across time and distance, that remain intact even when we cannot see or touch them. Sometimes these connections appear miraculous, defying rational explanation, yet they speak to something fundamental about what it means to truly know another being, to be recognized at a level beyond words. The echo of loyalty that reverberates through this story calls us to recognize and honor the profound connections in our own lives, with the animals who share our journey, with the people who stand beside us through difficulty, and with the parts of ourselves that remain faithful to who we truly are, even when circumstances force us into temporary hiding. Thank you for experiencing this incredible journey with us today. Has a special animal touched your life in a meaningful way? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how a dog or other pet has made a difference in your world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that celebrate the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful tales of hope and connection to audiences everywhere.